I'm Jason Klass, and this is Tenkara Talk. Every Tenkara angler in the West has probably entertained the idea of fishing in Japan at some point, and those who have made the journey will tell you it's complicated and can be very challenging. For this reason, many people dismiss it as nothing more than an unrealistic daydream. But it is attainable, if you know the right approach. My guest, Go Ishii, is a preeminent Tenkara figure in both Japan and the US, and in this episode, he walks us through the ins and outs of planning a trip, including where and when to go, how permits work, gear, and lots of insider advice on how to make sure your trip of a lifetime goes smoothly. He'll also explain why the next 5 years present an especially good window of opportunity to go. If you're planning a trip to Japan, you'll get a lot of questions answered in this hour, and learn a few things that might surprise you. So get your notebook out and let's talk Tenkara in Japan.
Hi Jason, how are you? Great to see your face again. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. We've been talking a lot lately over the last couple of months about a lot of things related to Tenkara, but specifically, we've been talking a little bit about Tenkara fishing in Japan, and like many anglers, I think in the U.S. and probably the West in general, Japan is on our Tenkara bucket list. And so I know I've been there before, but it was years before I heard about Tenkara, so I didn't get an opportunity to fish there. So it's definitely on my bucket list to go there. And as we were talking just before the show, I heard I'm not alone. Apparently, tourism in Japan is booming right now. So.
Yes.
For those of us who are thinking about planning a trip to Japan, specifically for Tenkara fishing, can you just start us off and give us an idea of what it's like as a Western tourist going to Japan?
So yes, just like you said, Japan is now the #1 destination for tourists, and there are some reasons why. I think Instagram, the social media, all the platform has been promoting Japan heavily, because the exchange rate right now is $1. What used to be 107 in 2018-19 is 155, 155 yen for $1. So you're getting that extra 45-50% discount on every dollar you spend. A lot of people get confused over the currency exchange. $1 is essentially 100 pennies, 100 cents. 1 yen is a penny, yet 10 cents is 10 yen. 100 yen used to be $1 or off by maybe 5, 7, 10% margin, but now it's 50% cheaper. I would say, well, not 50%. Compared to what it used to be, yes, about 50 cents. So $1 is now, meaning 100 yen for us is like 60 cents. It's for us, it's super expensive to buy US dollars, or euro as well. I can explain about economical and political background and why, but I don't want to dive too deep into that. But this is a trend that's going to continue, I think, for at least 3-4 years. War in Ukraine has something to do with it. COVID has something to do with it. The high interest rates by the U.S. Federal Reserve has something to do with it. It's a combination of Japanese big corporations realizing they have to diversify their portfolio. They're investing heavily into different countries, buying merger and acquisition, direct investments, institutional investors, private investors buying things up in different countries. There's a lot of yen is flowing out from Japan to other countries. And more than ever, Japanese are spending money on Netflix, YouTube Premium, Google services, Amazon Premium, Costco membership. All that is being charged to us in yen, but immediately they convert to US dollars because they're going to US corporations. So that adds to this deflation of yen, but it's not a terrible thing. Those investments Japanese corporations are making will eventually come back, but it's going to take time, more like 5 to 10 years. So if you are thinking about visiting Japan, the next 3 to 5 years is going to be golden. It's going to be so cheap
Right.
for you if you have your income in any currency but the yen.
Right.
Terrible for us. Fortunately, I have some income in USD too. Um, and yeah, but you have to be careful. Everything is full. All the hotels,
Mm.
restaurants, bullet trains. It's a challenge to get around. You're swimming through other tourists.
Right, right. Okay, so I mean, while this is good news for tourists in general, and it sounds to me like for Tenkara anglers, anyone who's thinking about going there, you've got a pretty decent window of opportunity, right? You know, any time within the next 5 years. So that allows for some time for planning and things like that.
Yes. So in terms of coming to Japan, yes, it's a great opportunity. But going tenkara fishing in Japan is going to be a huge risk and a challenge. It's going to be quite difficult for anyone from outside Japan to just come in and go tenkara fishing because Japan, I think I've told you before, 73% mountainous nation.
Right.
Um, Most of the population civilization is concentrated into these flat plains. Tokyo area, Nagoya, Osaka, and Kyoto, Fukuoka. That's why our population is so heavily condensed. And we live in very small homes because we have too many mountains that cannot be built
Yeah.
on or developed. Um, Number two, I think especially if you're coming from the US, the huge difference between here and the US is that our cities, towns and cities are built around train stations. Um,
So you're taking your Tenkara rod on the train.
yes, well, but where you would be catching trout, char species are way up into the mountains and very remote places. So typically you have
Mm.
no trains, maybe a bus line, but you may only see 3 buses a day on that line. You know what I mean? So you almost will. There are a few places that I can think of that you can access by trains, but only a few.
Mm.
And fishing is very competitive in Japan. Like I told you before, Keiryū fishing population they say is about 3.5 million. And if
Yeah.
you're trying to fish within 2 hours from Tokyo, where Tokyo metropolis has some 37 million people. So if you're fishing within like a 2 hour drive from Tokyo, the fishing is just not going to be great. There's going to be people even
Mm.
way, way deep. I've gone to places where I had to hike in 2 hours, climb waterfalls, use rope work to access, and you find like 5 parties fishing in the same river. Like, oh my gosh, why is everybody
Wow.
here?
Jeez.
They're telling me the same thing. So it's if you are after, it depends on what you're after. Quality fishing or just the experience, or if you want to fish with somebody to learn, then there are places for that close to Tokyo as well. We have, um, and you have to understand there's when you're outside your own country, and especially in a place like Japan, we have very unique set of rules, regulations, etiquette
Right.
that you have to think about. You can't just come and go. You have to do some research first, of course.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's not and it's a little bit different here in terms of licenses and permits and just a lot of different things, and we'll get to that in a moment. But so if you want to start out, I mean, do you really if you want to start planning your trip, do you need to know someone there locally who can help you with these things or take you or point you in the right direction?
Um, if you speak Japanese, if you speak and read Japanese, there are many resources online. But
Hmm.
I have to let me explain something first. All of our waters, oceanic resources, river and lake resources are regulated and controlled by the local fishing association.
Hmm.
Okay, and it's not by the river; it's by the district, like the county,
Uh,
yeah, resource management type people. Because fishing traditionally, I've mentioned this before, Japanese did not eat four-legged animals from year 670, like over 1,000 years ago, until we opened up to the West. So traditionally,
so the
Japanese have
Meiji
relied on,
Restoration.
yes, Meiji Restoration. And even today, if you go into the countryside, most people eat fish and vegetable, not so much meat. So government
Mm,
had to allow these people to have access to fishing for consumption, not recreation. So when we go
right.
fishing, we are borrowing that right from the fishing
Mm,
association for the day, or you can buy season tickets too. They're granting you like a sublease type setup. So you have to
okay,
buy,
interesting.
yeah, you have to buy a fishing ticket, a day ticket, or if you're fishing for 2 days, you have to buy two separate passes, or you can buy season tickets as well. But season tickets are typically six, 60 to $90 ish range. A
Hmm.
day ticket would be about 7 to 15 range.
Okay, that's not too bad.
But you have to know where to buy
But
them, and they may have
mm,
signs for local fishing associations, but it's all in kanji typically. They're not going to have a big
right,
English sign saying "buy your fishing ticket here." So
right.
you're probably going to need somebody local to
Right.
take you
You
around.
know, that's funny because when I was in Japan, I had been studying Japanese, but I could only read hiragana and katakana. I couldn't read kanji yet because we hadn't learned that yet. And you always if you can't read kanji, you're not going to understand things. And so that's interesting. What about like can you use Google Lens or something or Google Translate? The with your phone to scan it.
So I'm 47, and I'm starting to feel like I'm getting left behind a little bit. Starting to feel like I'm lagging behind in this technological, you know, uh,
Gotcha. Yeah.
advancement. Younger people today may have better knowledge on how to overcome those
Right.
difficulties. I'm not going to rule them out, but
Right.
there's so much more than just translation to it as well.
Right.
You have to remember that we
Right.
have different creatures. We have blood-sucking, super scary-looking. They're small, but gnarly-looking leeches. We have ticks that
Right.
carry parasites. We have venomous snakes too. We have wild boars, monkeys, black bears down here on main section of Japan. But up north in Hokkaido, we have brown bears, just like Alaska. If you don't know
Right. So
where you're
basically,
going,
if you go fishing in Japan, you're gonna die, right?
you have to know what the odds are, what potential
Sure.
risks you might be facing.
Right.
I
So
don't
it sounds
want.
to me more and more like you really need to know someone there. You really need someone who can go with you and help you
even
navigate these things.
even domestically, if you're from say New York and you want to go fishing in Montana for a week, you're typically probably going to hire a guide, right?
Right.
Because you don't know the area. If you haven't been there, if you don't know, um, so you're going to need to hire someone
Right.
probably.
But do they have guides in Japan? Like
Um,
Tenkara
I
guides or
in some probably not Tenkara guys. It's almost a non-existing thing. I've heard of fly
gotcha.
fishing guys up in Hokkaido if you go to specific locations. Um, I I'm a business consultant, so I don't do this for living, like Tenkara anything. But um, I have spoken with Keiichi, and I know there are people out there that want to come. If they want to hire, say, me to take them around for a day or two, I've decided on charging people 30,000 yen. That's about $200 now a day plus. But you
Mhm.
have to remember, we don't have any freeways. If I pick somebody up and he goes, okay, let's go to Gifu, that's a 5 hour drive. The highway toll is about $80 one way.
Wow.
Yeah, so you have
Wow.
to. We have lots of the things that appear to be the same, but the system is very different. We use more public transportation, trains and bullet trains. than cars.
Right.
So when
And
driving in
those in
cars,
themselves can be difficult to figure out.
hmm yes,
Just
and they have,
figuring out the
and
public transportation.
yeah, I had a friend from Hawaii come visit me, and she was only 2 train stations away, and I told her which color line, which platform, but I forgot that the same platform is shared by 3 different lines. So
Oh,
she ended up in like the next prefecture, and
oh
we
boy.
couldn't meet for lunch, so we met like 2 hours later. I had to navigate her back into Tokyo, and those things happen a lot.
Right. Yep.
You,
Yeah,
you, you,
Japan can be a little confusing to get around.
mm,
It's yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, I really think if I go, I should say when I go, I'm definitely gonna want to go with someone local who can help me with all that. But I've got some people in mind, so we'll see. But you mentioned Hokkaido.
mm.
So okay, I want to go to Japan. Well, where do I go? So are there? I mean, where are some pretty good places to go if I just want to? I really don't have anything specific in mind, but maybe I want to fish tenkara in Japan, and so where's some good places to go? And can you target different species by going to different places? I imagine the fishing is much different in Hokkaido than it is on other, islands. So, uh,
Mm. That U.S. Japan comparison map might be a good thing to have at this time. You can
mhm.
pop it up
Yep,
later if you can.
we'll put it up.
Yeah. So yamame, one species of trout we like to fish for, is mainland Honshu Island. Uh, so that would be eastern Honshu facing the Pacific and portion of Sea of Japan side, and western portion of Japan has Amago. They look very
Mm.
similar. But Amago has those colorful dots. Sometimes they're red, sometimes they're orange. Up in
Mm-hmm.
Hokkaido, they have a lot of yamame, and we also have iwana. Iwana prefers colder temperature because they're a char species. So you have to go higher into the mountains to be able to catch iwana. Or if you went to Hokkaido, it's colder, so you could
Mm.
catch iwana, and it depends on where you go. Like the Kurobe River has uh, is derives from the northern Alps, what we call huge mountains in Toyama Nagano prefecture border. Distance from the peak of the mountain to the ocean is very short, maybe 20 miles. So Toyama River, you can catch iwana fairly close to the ocean because the water doesn't cool. It stays cold enough for char species
Oh,
to
interesting.
thrive. Yeah. So it
Huh.
really depends on where
Interesting. Yeah.
you go. Um, some places you don't have to go deep into the mountains. Um, that's just local knowledge. You have to know like where to go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I imagine the further north you go in Hokkaido, you're gonna find
Oh yeah.
fewer crowds. Yeah,
Yes, less
and that's
people.
mostly hiking in.
Yeah. But usually we
Yeah.
hear about 1 or 2 deaths a year, fishermen being mauled or eaten by
Yeah.
a bear. It actually happens quite often.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, and a lot of people wear bear bells there for that reason.
I don't think that does anything if a bear is hungry. I think
Some
it
people say it's like ringing a dinner bell, but
yeah.
everyone.
What one thing I
uh,
learned about bears, the ones I've encountered way deep in the mountains, I feel completely fine and safe with them, unless
hmm,
it's a mama bear. They
right.
have better defense mechanism. They know how to retain their territories, and they're comfortable. It's the ones that got spat out down below to ones that come down to villages are the ones that are hungry and desperate. So those ones I'm more scared of for sure. But brown bears in general, I don't want to have anything to do with. They're
No,
so much
no,
bigger,
no.
so much more scarier. Yep.
Yeah. But we're kind of talking about a few different types of fishing here, because earlier you mentioned that it's tough. You have to hike in a long way, and we were talking earlier in you had just gotten back from fishing in the mountains, and you were talking about how like all banged up you were and black and blue and sore and everything because it's physically challenging. But that you were specifically doing Genryu fishing. I think most people that are going to go to Japan. I think they're probably going to go more for Keiru or Honryu.
They have
They're
to,
probably not going to. They're probably not going to go for the route super hardcore, because that's a whole different level of fishing. I mean, it's basically rock climbing, camping, and fishing combined. And it is very physically demanding. But I would think most people are going to be doing Keiru or Honryu.
If I were to take anybody new with me fishing, I would never take them to Gendu, because Gendu, it's all about teamwork. We bring different,
Yes.
we calculate weight, we plan things way ahead, so we know who is bringing what, we know who is
Right.
capable, we understand our capabilities as well. Like I'm heavier than most Japanese, so they all know I'm probably gonna lag behind, but I have the strength to carry more than others. So they know. So they take that into consideration. Okay, Keiichi usually is the fastest one, so he'll go ahead and maybe um, set up camp. And in order to balance the pace, we'll bring in somebody that's in the middle, in between me and Keiichi. So that person
Yeah.
sort of balances out the speed in a way, because otherwise the vegetation is so dense in the mountains. If a person gets ahead by say 50 yards, you're not going to be able to see the person.
Yeah.
And you might get lost, go off
Yeah.
track. So Gendu is just out of question for most people. Yeah.
Every time we talk about this, I can't help but think that it reminds me of all the planning that goes into an expedition up to Everest or something. I mean, it's very, like you said, it's teamwork. It's a group effort. It's very complicated, a lot of details, and I'd much prefer to just do good old K-view fishing. I'm happy with that.
It's easier.
So, I don't want to wear a helmet to go fishing.
No, every time I go into Gendu type fishing, I regret it so much. It's so hard. It's so painful. My toenails come off. And I come back and I start, sipping on my wine, looking at different mountains, pictures or maps. And then I start fantasizing again, and I put myself through it.
Yeah. It's like, I get it.
Yep.
Well, okay. So if, again, let's say Genryu's out, and we're just talking, typical streams. I just want to talk a minute about tackle. Could I assume I can just bring pretty much my standard Tenkara rods that I fish here in the US, my Oni Type 1 or Type 3 for, I mean, what kind of tackle do people usually fish there? I don't even know what kinds of rods are popular in Japan, to be honest with you.
The core Tenkara people, it's a small community. Let's say Ishigaki Sensei, Dr. Ishigaki, or Professor Ishigaki. He is a great ambassador to Tenkara, meaning his style of fishing, the way he explains it, his techniques are more towards introducing Tenkara to the general public. And there are people that sort of stay at that entry level, and there are people who go to different groups, different lectures, and go far deeper. Like Masami Sakakibara, Tenkara Noni, he is by far the best Tenkara angler I've ever seen or fished with. His style of fishing is very animalistic. He's extremely knowledgeable, has lots of experience in very challenging environments. And I think he's very expanded the definition of Tenkara in so many ways by using different types of line, different size flies. So it depends on who you talk to. But generally speaking, we use rods from 3 meters to 4.5. meters.
Yep.
So average 3.64 meters. Most rivers you can fish with a 3.2 to 3.6. And when I fish
So
the
it's pretty
Hondu,
similar to the rods I fish.
yeah, when you're fishing bigger rivers where it's wide open, which we call Hondu, the um, main. So if let's talk about Shokawa, Sho River, and Sho River system. It has a lot of tributaries. When you go into a tributary, oftentimes it's covered, and you want to crouch
Yeah.
down. But if you go back down to Shokawa, the main stream, you have all kinds of space, so you can swing a 7-8 meter line around, no problem, if you can cast it right. So then you're
Right.
gonna want like a 4 to 4.5 meter rod. Anything
Do
longer
people
is going to
fish?
be too heavy.
Right. Do people in Japan fish zoom rods? I'm just curious. Are
Um,
they popular?
yeah,
Here they're very popular, as you know.
not
But
the advantage of Tenkara to me is if you fish enough and if you have fished long enough, your rig feels like an extension of yourself. So you can pinpoint your cast to, like, if a rock is here, if I want the fly here, not here, here. Like, I can do that. But if you keep on switching your length around, it gets harder. But then the environment in the States, I think rivers are a little bit more different. I think you have more fish. And so, but there are of course benefits to zoom rods, and there's also a downside to zoom rods, which is for the same reason.
right.
Furaibo, the red rod by Tendu, that's a very
Yeah.
popular zoom rod. But I think
Okay.
most people fish with it in one length in Japan. They don't constantly pull it out or pull it in, you know. But that rod is so expensive now. You know, have you seen the price lately on the
No, I haven't.
Furaibo?
No.
I think
No.
the longer one, 3.9, is like 85,000 yen. If it was
Wow.
3 years ago, it would have been like $800. But now maybe 550, 600. It's still
No, that's still a
big
lot. Yeah,
money. Yeah.
for Tenkara. Right.
And for the shorter
Well,
one, yeah, it's
I was
like
just going to say. I
350.
mean, so anyone who had maybe a 12 or 13 foot rod, and then maybe a shorter rod for those smaller tributaries, they'd be in good shape.
Mm. It's like golf clubs, I think. You gotta
Sure.
come in with something you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and also you can't go golfing with one club. I always
Yeah.
use that analogy, right? Because you can't drive with a putter and you can't putt with a 9-iron, right? So,
Mm.
you know, so yeah, that's
Usually,
interesting. So,
I was just going to
go
show
ahead.
you. I just mainly use these two rods. It's essentially the same rod. If I took off this, I put this grip on myself. This is a baseball bat grip tape I put on, just so it doesn't slip around so much. This is 3.6. This is 4.5. So these two rods basically cover all my fishing in Japan.
Okay, right. And
Yeah.
if you go to the video version of this episode, we'll have a picture up so you can see Go's rods.
Okay.
And what about lines? Are most people fishing level lines, furled lines, tapered nylon lines? Is it a mix?
I think it tradition. When I was little, I'd go fishing. Every now and then, I'd see a Tenkara angler. When I say little, like teenage years. Back then, it was mainly furled lines. But then Dr. Ishigaki, Masami Sakakibara is, I think, one of the pioneers in level line Tenkara fishing. And Dr. Ishigaki has been fishing with level lines himself. So I think majority of Tenkara anglers today in Japan use level lines.
Yeah.
And you want
Well,
to
Sebata-san uses his furled line.
Yep. Yeah. So
And he's got
traditionally,
some.
Tenkara lines used to be, furled horse tail hair, casting lines. We can't make those today. The horse tails are just too hard to come by. Um, but
Yeah.
Tenkara level lines are so much more economical. I don't even use Tenkara. When you see a spool of line that says Tenkara level line, I avoid them altogether because they're
Yeah.
too
You
expensive.
use the saltwater, use that saltwater fluorocarbon,
Yeah.
right? We'll have a picture of that up too in the video. But that line here, we can't get brightly colored fluorocarbon. We
Mm,
can get it saltwater fluorocarbon that's clear, but
mm,
you can't get it in pink or orange or anything like that.
right.
I don't know why.
Uh, well, you have to.
And so
Another
most
thing,
people, yeah.
if you're coming to Japan to go fishing, you have to come see our fishing tackle stores.
I was just gonna. That was one of my questions on the list.
Mm,
So I was in Japan for college, so I didn't have time to go into any of the fishing stores or anything like that. But I've seen pictures, I've seen videos, I've had friends that have been in them, and I've always died to go into all the big stores like Sensui and all that stuff. So tell us a little bit about the Tenkara industry there. I know it's a small part, but in Japan has a huge, rich fishing culture and a diversity of techniques, many techniques that just don't exist here. So just walk us through like what's it like if I go to Japan, where are some shops that I definitely must see while I'm there?
um, okay. There are, well, a lot of the fishing tackle have moved onto online scene. Some of the biggest fishing tackle stores are usually just outside Tokyo. So when you're in Tokyo, you might have to go to 3 or 4 locations that focus on different types of gear. And so you're gonna need a guide for
Yeah.
this too.
Oh,
um,
geez.
um, so Joshuya, there's a chain called Casting, and there are regional, uh, more privately owned fishing stores. Fishing industry in Japan, and fishing show is usually end of
Oh,
January.
yeah.
If you came to our fishing show, then you would really be able to grasp the size of fishing. There's a method of fishing,
Yeah.
specific gear for every type of fishing, from
Yep.
squid fishing to bottom
IU,
fishing,
yeah.
sardine, sweet fish, saltwater, lake,
Yep.
river, everything. And tenkara is
Yeah.
just one of type of fishing that falls into the genre Keiryu fishing. Keiryu fishing is just generally the fishing in the mountains, mountain streams.
Yep.
So that could mean
So it could be
lure,
fly or bait or lure,
fly,
right?
bait, lure, and tenkara is
Right.
probably the smallest one of all. But
Yep.
still, yet companies like Shimano, Daiwa, they're enormous. Daiwa is backed by an investment fund. Shimano, as you know, they make those high-end shifters for
Yeah, for
bicycles.
bicycles. They make
Bicycles,
derailleurs and
right?
shifters and yeah,
SPX, and they
brakes.
have like a 73% market share in mid to high-end bike parts, I think.
Mm.
Shimano, and the fishing, it is just a secondary business for them, but they still do
Yeah.
about, last year, I think they did about 780 million revenue.
And that's small for them. That's
Yeah,
tiny, right?
compared to the
Yeah.
bike business, it's maybe 1/3 or even 1/5. I don't know. But even
Yeah.
then, $700 million sales as an industry, just one company in an industry, is quite significant, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Daiwa does maybe 650 or something like that. And then there are smaller companies, like Mizuno does some
Nishin
fishing,
and
Nishin, Uzaki
yeah.
Nishin,
Yep.
Tendu. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, and I've heard that if you go into one of the really big shops, it's huge, and there's just rods and rods and rods, but Tenkara might be just like this little tiny section of it. It might be a pretty
Mm,
small
mm.
percentage, so still pretty interesting, I think. But
It's always better to buy online for Tenkara. You just have more variety
uh,
of selection. If you
yeah,
know what you're looking for, just go on Amazon JP and buy it from there, and have it shipped to your
Yeah.
hotel. Yeah.
Oh, so while you're in Japan, it's still cheaper to buy it while you're there and just have it. Okay, that's
Well,
interesting. That's a good.
oftentimes, I think it is possible to buy them from your country, but you're going to have to pay extra for shipping, and
Yeah,
that's cheaper probably than coming to Japan. But if you're coming here
right.
anyways, and if you're looking to buy a few
Exactly.
rods, that's the way to do it.
That's a really good tip because we can get stuff through Amazon Japan or Platt or a variety of things, but the shipping is always what kills you. So good tip if you're in Japan and you see something in a shop or you're interested in a rod, buy it there and you won't have to pay the shipping. So
So go
that's a good tip.
immediately to a fishing store and check out all the items you want, and then go on your phone and look up on Amazon.jp and see which one's cheaper. And it's usually Japan's a small enough country. We have same day delivery, next day delivery. It's not going to take 2-3 days for anything to
Right.
get to your
Right. It's
right.
going to be fast.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Well, I'll definitely put that on my list of
Mm.
things to remember when I go there. Um, and so I'm imagining you buy everything online.
Um, about yeah, I would say 99%. Every now and then I'll go into a fishing store. There's one about 30 minutes away. That's really good from my place. Just to kill time, and I'll usually pick up a
Yeah.
thing or two. I might see a new line in saltwater fishing section, and a few weeks ago I bought this line. It's called that pink line fish cannot see. I was like, ooh, and it has
Oh,
this slight pink
nice.
tone to it, and it's really
Yeah.
wiry. I was like, wow, this would be great for Tenkara. I tried it out. It's actually a pink line that people can't see. I couldn't
Oh,
see
yeah.
it. Maybe the rig was too long. Maybe I might try it on a shorter rig. But s- s- things like that, you have to go into the fishing store. I'll do that every now and then
Right.
to see what new items are out with lines or anything. And I may
Right.
pick up a few things just to try, but the essentials, I usually buy on Amazon or online.
Yeah. But for example, could I walk into a fly shop that carries Tenkara gear? Could I test cast like 3 or 4 different rods? Do they allow that?
I don't think there's any room in Japan for test casting. They'll probably
Yeah. You could use a short line.
you can probably extend the line and wiggle with it, but there's no,
But they won't let you cast it or
yeah.
something. Okay. Yeah, because here in the U.S., as you know, we have such a fly shop culture, right? The
Hmm.
fly shop isn't just a place you go to buy things. You go there to talk, to chat, waste time, have some coffee, pet the dog, the shop dog, chit chat with other customers. It's a social thing, right? It's almost like a subculture. And then we also have this concept of supporting local business, right? So throw some money at the brick and mortar stores. So it seems a little bit different in Japan. But one of our problems here is that we can't ever test Tenkara rods in person. We always have to order them online and uh, see if we like them, and then hopefully they have a good return policy. And then if we don't like it, send it back or sell it. So
Hmm.
that's one problem we've always had here in the U.S. is that we don't have any brick and mortar stores that really carry Tenkara. And if they do, they carry one brand and they carry 3 rods from that brand, and they know absolutely nothing about Tenkara. So I imagine if I walked into a shop in Japan, I can talk to someone who actually knows the rods and knows about Tenkara.
That's been happening in Japan too. Because of the popularity of Tenkara outside Japan, Tenkara has spread to a wider, public base.
Oh,
And and it, about 10 years ago, we saw several new companies pop up and introduce their versions of Tenkara rods, but they were just garbage. They
oh yeah,
uh, it takes a long time to acquire a proper casting technique in Tenkara. Tenkara is such a unique type of fishing. For me, it was when I first started, because every other type of fishing I had done, from sardine fishing to sea bass fishing to carp fishing, you use lead weight or lures.
Yep.
You use the weight to cast your rig. And tenkara was the first type of fishing where you use the weight of this super light line and flexibility of the rod to cast your hook with feathers, your fly, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
to me was that I think that's what really fascinated me about tenkara. Right?
Yeah, it is
It
very
was
different than any other type of fishing if you think about it.
right.
But
So
it sounded to me early, like you just said earlier, that uh, the growth of Tenkara in the U.S. or West
mm,
has actually influenced Tenkara fishing in Japan and helped it spread more in Japan. Is that what I just heard you say?
yeah, like Japanese people are we're a very homogenous nation. Most people don't have access to information from the outside because they don't speak any language other than Japanese. I read news in Japanese and English and articles and everything else. Most people only have access to that single language. So when they
Right.
hear that something Japanese is being accepted or spreading outside Japan, it becomes kind of
Ah,
a news, right?
yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, it's like a reverse influence kind of. That's
yes,
really
yes, yes.
interesting.
And
Huh.
people like re-acknowledge the value of history and their history culture. Like, wow, I had um, a lot of people don't even know what tenkara is in Japan still, but it really did help spread tenkara in Japan.
Wow.
But along with
Huh.
it came a lot of um, bad products as well. But all that has
Well,
settled down now.
we've
Yeah,
had our share of ours too here, but
yeah,
it's kind of leveled out. And today, I think
yeah.
there are just a million choices out there that are they're all really good. But that's really interesting you bring that up, because I remember I think it was Ishigaki Sensei said that he thought that there were more tenkara anglers in the U.S. than there are in Japan, and I think
Well,
you and I talked about that too.
um, so demographically speaking, population of U.S. is what, 360 million ish.
No, no, no. I think it's still under 300 million. I think.
Is it? Is it? I think it's
Yeah,
about
I don't
300
know.
million. And Japan is
Okay, let's say
200.
300.
Japan is 128 million.
Mm,
So you have
okay.
almost three times the number of people. And that's why
Right.
our houses are so small. We are, squished into small places.
I've
Um,
stayed in one. I know. Yep. Yeah.
yeah, just be prepared to walk sideways into your hotel room if you are a
Yes.
budget traveler. Yeah,
Japan. Japan is not a place for the claustrophobic. I can tell you
right.
that. Um,
Yes.
everything is small. So,
Um,
um,
yeah, but good thing is, oh, yeah, I don't know if it's a good thing. It is actually a social issue, an economic issue we're facing, because the older generation they cannot maintain their country lifestyle. It's a lot of labor, it's a lot of work. Um, and young people, there are no jobs in remote places. So everybody is congregating to major cities. Population of Japan
uh,
has been declining for about 10 years now, but population of Tokyo has been increasing steadily. So, which is kind of a good thing for fishing. There's less people in remote places if you're willing to get there, but these
yeah.
regional cultures are starting to disappear.
Hmm. Interesting. Are there young people coming into Tenkara in Japan?
Sure, sure. There's lots of
Yeah.
young, able, capable, but most younger people, though, I see them getting into lure fishing. I think a different
Mm,
mechanical tackle appeals to. They're all shiny and all the small,
yeah.
tiny lures. Our lure industry is ridiculous. They're extremely intricate, fancy, and expensive.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, as someone who used to do a lot of spin fishing and bait
Mm,
casting, I can tell you some of those Shimano bait casters are pretty sexy.
I
I mean,
know.
they look like a spaceship, and they're so high tech, and they're
Mhm.
is if you're a gear junkie, those reels are, pretty cool. So
Yes,
I can see the appeal.
I could easily get into it, but I know if I did, I would be spending tens of thousands of dollars. So I'm trying to
Yeah,
refrain from that. Tenkara is nice and simple. It's very economical, compact.
that's
So
right.
yeah.
Yeah. One thing we didn't talk about yet is flies. Flies.
Mm.
Um, so I think first of all, we have a lot of misconceptions here in the U.S. about what kinds of flies people actually fish in Japan. Some people think, everyone in Japan fishes one fly only. Just the other day, I saw someone comment that in Japan they only use Sakasa kebari. I've heard all kinds of myths about what kind of flies people use. So, for the record, what kinds of flies do people actually use in Japan
Um,
for Tenkara?
Everybody is different. Yeah. Some people have a fly fishing background, meaning they used to fly fish. Now they're more into tenkara. Or some people do
Mhm.
both. And those people would typically use mainly Western flies. They're usually into dry fly fishing, from what I've seen. They
Yep,
like
dry
seeing the
flies. Yeah.
fish rise to the surface, and that's exciting. Traditional, like most tenkara anglers, we use regular futsu, regular hackle,
Yep.
kibaris, and some sakasa. But it's not so much about the style; it's how you use them is what differentiates, the skill set of different anglers. I
Right.
typically like luring the heck out of my kibari rather than natural drift. Um,
L-
if the fish is here, in the main current, and most people would try to cast the fly somewhere above him, so it naturally
mhm.
drifts down to the fish, and the fish takes it,
Right.
and that's nice, but it gets boring after a while. Like
Yeah. It's
how can I get
repetitive. Yeah.
repetitive, and how can I get this fish to get out of his position and comfort
I
zone
see.
and
Yep.
come to my
Yep.
fly. And even if I do miss the hooking section apart, it's actually quite satisfying just to have seen the
Yes.
fish react to your sasoi or luring action. Sometimes I
Right.
tap on
And
the,
that's something
yeah, go
that
ahead.
that's something I talk about all the time is that I want to catch a fish in a particular way, a
Mm,
particular manner, right? And so I choose Tenkara. I choose the self-imposed limitation of fishing with a fixed length line and no
mm,
reel. And I want, let's say I go out fishing. I say I want to catch a fish on this fly, a Sakasa kebari. Today I feel like fishing downstream, and that's how I fish. And if I don't catch a fish, it's okay. But if I do catch a fish, it's more rewarding because I caught it in the way that I wanted to, the way I preferred, right? Just like you're talking about, you don't want to just force feed them the fly, right? And just keep casting until you hit it just right and it almost goes right in their mouth. You want to entice them out of their lie and come to you. And so for you, that's more rewarding. So I think that's really interesting that you said that because
mm.
we all have our little goals, our little micro goals like that, right? Today I want to catch a fish on a dry fly, right? And I'm so glad you said dry fly because there's also another misconception that tenkara anglers in Japan don't fish dry flies.
Oh,
And I've seen it. Yeah, go ahead.
and it gets boring to some, like people. I've met people like Sebata-san and others that, yes, only use one type of fly, maybe in different colors, but it's that same pattern
Right,
is all they use.
right,
And some people, like me, I don't care what fly. I don't like to tie flies anymore because I meet so many people, and they usually give you a few flies. You give them a compliment or two, and they're like, "Oh, Terry, you can take several." And my fly boxes are full of random flies. So I'll just
yep,
take that fly and see if I can. I've told you once, yeah, like reverse engineering. Like, why did
right,
that person make this fly this way? What was his intent? How was he going to use it? And see if I can do the same. And I might get it right, I might get it wrong, but it's just that thought process that makes it more fun for me.
Right.
So we're way more, I guess, fluid and flexible with how we see and use our flies. I think there's no
And the
set
flies
rule
are
in Japan. Yeah.
right. Right. And the flies, I think, are less important too, as you just said. Really the focus is more on technique, right? And we are ideal in Tenkara. It's always said that Tenkara relies more on skill than gear. And however, in the U.S. and the West in general, I think we are so fixated on gear and especially flies. We love to post pictures of flies and recipes and share and trade. And the first question someone asks if they see someone catch a fish, what fly did you catch it on? They never ask what technique did you use to catch that fish. They say what fly. And that's just we have a different way of thinking, right? We think the fly is, the most important thing. So it's so interesting that in Japan you have the opposite, and that is evidenced by the fact that if you look at most flies of the masters, whether it's Sakakibara-san or Ishigaki Sensei, they're very simple: thread body, hackle. That's it, and they don't care. And if they normally tie it with grizzly hackle, but they're out of the grizzly hackle and they only have olive, he'll use olive or brown, whatever's on hand, because it's not the fly, it's the angler, it's the presentation.
And we have such very different historical backgrounds behind both countries and between Western fly fishing and Tenkara as well. Western fly fishing, British nobility, right? It's more about the grace, the glamour, status, um,
Yes, it's a
and you're
gentleman's sport.
a gentleman's sport trying to imitate each in type of insect in different phases and
Yep.
match the hatch. And the movie A River Runs Through It, what was it, 1992 or three? That complete, I think, to me,
Yep.
sealed the deal. Like it set the tone for Western fly fishing in the West. I think in the U.S. at least.
Yeah.
But Tenkara is just these, they're like mountain folks, um, trying to catch iwana or yamame in the most efficient way possible, and it's not designed to catch the biggest of a fish because I think I mention to you before. If you take a fish and if you filleted a fish and only consumed the fillet and leaving the head, the bones behind, you're only taking in about 30% of the nutrition that whole fish has to provide. A lot of the calcium, the collagen are in its scales, the bones, the head. We typically like to eat a whole fish, head to tail.
Mm.
And because we didn't eat meat for many centuries, fish were a vital source of protein and calcium. So the what do you call the shokuryoshi, the professional tenkara anglers who made a living off of catching fish, they were aiming for about 7 to 8 inch fish. There was more of them than bigger and smaller fish, and they are ideal for consumption, right? So that
Right. And
that
ayu are really small too, usually, right?
anywhere from like 4 inches to 7 or 8, maybe. They can get
Right.
bigger, but they're the flavor goes away. They're not as good. They're better when
Oh,
they're small. Yeah.
right. Okay. Yeah, I've heard that. They're not as sweet or something if they get
Hmm.
older.
Hmm.
Yeah. They're called, aren't they called something sweet fish or something
Sweet
like
fish.
that?
Sweet fish. To
Yeah.
me, yeah,
Right.
probably one of the best tasting fish, salt and freshwater. Ayu.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Iwana,
Okay.
Yamame, they're okay. I
Right.
don't like these
And
anymore.
right. Since you brought it up, another thing we've been talking about too is catch and release versus catch and keep. Um,
Oh yeah, may I have to go back to the local town or county fishing association. Many of them now have set up no fishing zones, fly fishing only zones, catch and release zones, tanker only zones, and it's like it's
wow.
very confusing. You have to, yeah, you're probably gonna need a local person to take care of.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so that's another layer of complexity
Mhm.
where having someone that knows yeah, okay, that makes sense. But if I go to Japan and I mean I can just keep a fish and take it back to wherever I'm staying and cook it
Uh,
up. Could I take it to a restaurant to be prepared, or do I have to have a kitchen? I mean,
it depends
for
on
those who
what type
for
of
those who
fish.
want to try it.
It depends on well, if you are in catch and kill zone, regular fishing zone, yeah, you can take the fish. When I used to keep all of my catch when I was little, I used to clean the fish riverside after I'm done, and
Hmm.
wrap them up in bamboo leaves one by one, and that keeps them fresh longer. And then sometimes I would cook them by the river. And what's nice about Japan, you can
Yeah,
build a fire in most places. Like
nice.
we
I was
don't
just
have
gonna
these
ask that.
national parks where like no campfire signs are everywhere in the states. Most places in
Right. So if
Japan
you
you can
wanted
build a
to,
fire.
you could have a real traditional shore lunch. You could,
Mm,
catch fish and make a fire.
yeah,
Okay, that's really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of places here, fire is especially where I live. We're in a perpetual
Mm,
drought, so it's very
yeah.
difficult to find places where you can make a fire. So that's good to know. Um, so uh, give us give us a picture, a snapshot of a typical day, and I'm going fairly easy K-Ryu fishing. Let's say, okay, I wake up. I want you to take me from. I wake up in bed. How do I get to the river? I'm on the river. What do people typically do? Do they have lunch together? Do they, set up camp chairs and have lunch together, or do they fish all day and then maybe go out to the bar or for dinner afterwards? What's a typical a day?
Um, Depends on the season because early in the season we still have snow melt, so we have to wait. We have to go in early in the morning when it's still cold, and when it warms up during the day, the snow melt comes in, the water level rises, it gets really sketchy. So then you get out.
Okay,
So
and
you go out.
what months are those?
Depends on location, altitude, but typically
Oh,
March to May. And then the height of the season is usually June, July, August. And if we know the fishing is good, we will wake up early, get there, 5 a.m. Maybe hike in
wow.
for half an hour, start fishing, and we would fish probably for. Um, we rarely fish all day, but we do. If we do, we'll have like cup noodle is the light, super light, easy way, and so you have to bring like a little gas, um, portable gas grill thing.
Yep. I used to do that with ramen, and I had my little Snow Peak stove and my little
Right.
titanium Snow Peak
Yes.
canister, and
Right.
I
Right.
know those
Yeah.
are really popular in Japan too.
Yeah.
Right?
Or depends on where you go. Sometimes we'll go in, fish for 2 hours. We come out and we just take it easy for during the day because in the summertime it gets really hot, even fishing in the river. If the temperature gets too high, then it's bad for us. It's bad for fishing too. Fish tend to
Right.
go dive deep, hide behind a rock or something. So then we'll wait till the evening session. We go in around sunset. If the sunset's around 7, the best fishing is usually from 6:45 to like 6
Yeah.
55. That
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like a 10-minute window where everything starts, happening.
Yeah. It's
Um,
magic. That. Yeah. And
yeah, yeah, it's that. So we usually have to go in with a little, headlamp dangling from our necks because
mm,
other we can't see anything coming back out. So it depends on the time of the season. We can take it easy, and what I like to do when I'm just starting out a season early on, my body's not ready yet for Gendu. So I go, fish one section for 2 hours, another section for a few hours, have lunch, maybe go um, look for sansai, the edibles, mountain edibles. We went
yep.
fossil hunting the other day for a few hours. That was
Oh,
kind of
that's
fun,
cool.
just with the
Yeah.
helmet. Yeah, yeah. And then we went back in for an evening session, caught a few more, and that was nice.
Yeah, and that's interesting because here people do combine Tenkara. We have this. I'm sure you've seen it. This kind of running meme, Tenkara Plus, right?
Mm.
And so people do Tenkara Plus, biking or whatever. But mushroom hunting is a big one here. But I've never heard of Tenkara Plus fossil hunting. That's pretty interesting.
You get so happy.
Yeah.
Well, typically when you go deep into the mountains, you'll see different layers of different, Jurassic era um,
Oh yeah.
surfacing, and you'll see bits and pieces of fossils on Riverside. It's really neat. So depends on where you are. I think Colorado might be a good place. Probably Montana too. I know you've got lots of fossils there. So mushroom
Yeah.
hunting. Some people go take pictures of little wildflowers or birds. I get tired of fishing after like 3 hours, so I
Really?
try to.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
I'm just not fish hungry as I used to be because you go through so many phases.
Yeah.
First, you want to catch a fish, that fish, yamame or amago, you wanna. And once
Right.
you figure out how to do it, you want to catch as many. It doesn't matter what size.
The
So in
most
your like,
fish. Yep.
you want to fish all day, every day, and then you
Yep.
get tired of that, and you want like the
And the
big
biggest
special
fish.
fish,
Yep.
and you get
Yep.
that done. It's like, wow, I feel so bad for all the little fishies I've caught, and like, like, why don't I just leave them alone?
Wow.
What am I trying to do? So sometimes, when I'm especially when I'm trying to show people how to fish, tenkara, I break
Yeah.
off the hook part on the kibari and
It's a good
kind
idea.
of, yeah, grind off the rough edges so I can fish without catching one.
Yeah.
And it's actually fun because it takes away all the burden of pulling in the line and unhooking them and taking
I
pictures.
remember seeing this one guy who he would purposely clip off the points on all of his dry flies
Mm,
because all he cared about was just seeing the fish come up to the fly in the take. He didn't care if he landed or not, right? That was
right.
the thrill for him, just watching it. But he didn't. He figured, why should I torture the fish, right? So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you feel guilty about hooking the fish. You probably should have thought of that about that before you hooked hundreds and hundreds of fish and impaled
Well,
them with a
I feel that way now
sharp
because
hook point.
I have hooked, killed, and eaten hundreds of. I've been fishing in the mountains since I was like 10 or 11. I'm 47 now
Right,
this year. So
right.
um, I just look back in history, in time, and all the little creatures, fish. I wonder if I've released many of them. Like I wonder if they've survived. I wonder if they were
Oh
able
boy.
to reproduce. I, so I mean, I
Well,
still like fishing, but just a few fish now satisfies me.
yes, I understand that. Really, honestly, I don't care how many I catch or how big they are. I just don't want to get skunked. As
Mm,
long as I don't get skunked, I'm content, right? But I just can't stand, those fishless days, especially when everything looks like it should be perfect, right?
mm.
Everything should be working, and it just doesn't happen. Those are the days. That's the only thing I care about. Otherwise, I'm content with just catching a couple fish. And I've quit early too. I've gotten to that stage. When I was young, I would fish 10 hours if there was 10 hours of daylight. And now it's kind of like I'll go for half a day. And I feel fine fishing for 3 hours or 4 hours and calling it a day and going doing something else. So I understand that, and I believe, and I agree with you. I think it is part of the evolution of an angler.
I think I've just become more knowledgeable, and I have in terms of skill technique. I don't think I can get any better unless your physicality has a lot to do with your casting mechanism, your fishing style too. Like if I lost 25 pounds and became lean and flexible, I could probably fish very with more like Masami Sakakibara.
I
I,
I know.
I
I
think
was
I
I was just
can.
thinking all the experts are like really thin,
Hmm.
all of them. That's interesting. So there
Yeah,
must be
but
something to
that's
that.
my limitation, my physicality. But so in terms of I've learned to become more efficient with my fishing too. Rather than just fishing all day, I know I just go in when it really matters, like the early morning time or the evening session, or like it depends on the time of the year. You can fish daytime in small streams where it's covered and cool. That's where fish tend to concentrate when it's really hot. So I know I can catch 5 or 6 immediately. So I've just
Right.
learned to become more efficient with my fishing.
And then that's another reason where having someone who knows those local waters is going to know all about the rhythms and cadence of the river. So yeah,
Right.
that's really interesting.
And more importantly, when people say, yes, I have a Tenkara rod, I fish Tenkara, the way they fish Tenkara might be very different from how we fish it too. So um,
How so?
a lot of the people I've seen on videos are they use thick furrowed lines and they cast. And they're not very good with their casting. They splash the heck out of the surface with their heavy line,
Uh,
which chases most
yeah.
fish away. So you know, I don't know how the person fishes. So like, if I were to take somebody, I would want to go to like an easy place. There's a place called
Yeah.
Tokyo Trout Country. It's perfect. They have this gorgeous, beautiful, very tough river, but right next to it they have a building and a pond stocked with rainbows. So we can spend the first hour just kind of talking and casting, uh, figuring out the techniques for the first hour, catching poor little rainbows, stocked rainbows, and then we go down to the river and actually try to catch fish in like a proper Japanese teru.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, what I want to just kind of highlight what I think some important takeaways are here for anyone who's thinking about going to Japan. Flies don't really matter that much. Technique
Anything.
is what matters. And everything Go is talking about right now is all technique. He's not talking about what kind of fly or anything like that. So don't sweat the flies. Whatever you have, Tenkara wise will probably work. But technique is going to matter here. So as you just pointed out, those heavy furrowed lines that can spook the fish. Well, in Japan, their fish populations aren't like they are here in the US. So you may not get a lot of shots at a fish. So the last thing you want to do is fly halfway around the world to come there and get a shot at a gorgeous yamame or something. And you scare the hell out of them with this big heavy line. So that's another thing that it's technique, not fly. Fly doesn't matter. You can spook a fish or catch a fish with any fly. So it's technique, and it's also knowing these local rhythms of the water. So I think that's a really important takeaway here.
The rhythm of fishing too, because our rivers are so gradient, fast and heavy,
Yep.
and so our drifts are much shorter. It's the first cast that really matters, and all it takes is like 2 seconds. Accurate, pinpoint cast, 1, 2. If there's no fish, or if the fish is not responding to it, we'll just move on. Yeah, so
Yep.
it's like 1, 2,
Yep.
3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. A lot of people tend to sit in one spot and fish the same section for way too long when they first come to Japan.
Yep. It's funny. Ishigaki Sensei also, he moves around a lot too. And he actually, I think he made a comment to, I think it was Daniel, the founder of Tenkara USA. He said he's the only guy I've seen who moves more than I do. Because I do move a lot, and I feel the same way. If I can't catch the fish in a few casts, I'm not going to change flies and pound the water. I'll move on to another spot where I can see a fish that is maybe a little bit more receptive. But I do like to move a lot.
Yes.
And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because we might get there and say, well, there's got to be a fish in that hole, and we'll just flog the water, and just you're basically wasting time. Is the way I
So
look at
in
it.
Japan, the saying is Tenkara is fished with your legs, with your feet, by
Oh, I like
covering
that.
more surface distance,
Yep.
right? Not necessarily
I like
staying
that.
in one spot, and our shoes are built for that too. Like if you look at Western fly fishing boots, they're huge and heavy,
Yeah.
and they're ideal for
Yep.
settling in one place. Japanese
Yep.
Kiru shoes are very light and flexible, ideal for walking the riverbed.
Yeah, that's a really great distinction there. That's true. Ours are big and clunky and overbuilt, and
Uh-huh.
just wow, that's really, I never even thought about that. Yeah, so the agility. Another thing about Ishigaki Sensei, he's hopping around on the rocks, and I mean, like it's nothing, like he's walking down the sidewalk. You can just tell he is so in tune with the riparian environment that he just moves around it like it's nothing. Whereas I'm tripping and kind of looking to make sure I've got a good footing, and it's just all so natural to him. But it also goes back to what you were pointing out about, the roots of Tenkara. It was meant to be an efficient method of harvesting fish. It wasn't a sport. It wasn't, fun time. It was a way of catching as many fish as possible. And so if you look at it that way, you want to cover a lot of water as much as possible too, if you want to catch as many fish as you can.
Exactly.
Right. Yes, that's interesting. So, well, we're almost out of time, but is there? I know it's a big question, but can you give us kind of just a final piece of advice for anyone who's got Japan on their bucket list?
Um, no. If you
No.
would just, uh, no, well, if
Okay,
just
let's
don't
see.
go
You're going
into
to be
one.
attacked. You're going to be killed by a bear and leeches. You're going to be covered in leeches
Yeah.
while the bear eats you. Yeah.
hmm One time I
Yep.
went when I was 18. I came out and I had like 18 leeches sucking on my ankles,
Ah.
both of my ankles, and I almost fainted. I remember. um,
Oh boy.
yeah,
From blood loss.
no, no, just seeing, and
Okay.
after they're done sucking on your blood, they like they get
Yeah,
bigger and
they're
they're fully
engorged
erect,
with it.
and yeah, yeah, and it's just so gnarly. But yeah, just don't go wandering into the mountains yourself. Is the best advice. Reach out to someone. Make sure you understand the cost of transportation. And if somebody was, most people, there are no professional guides in Tenkara. So if you ask somebody to go with you, you're taking away their time away from their work to. So compensation and all that you should discuss first. Mhm.
Yes.
Um,
Also, I want to point something out here. Um, as Go said, there aren't really professional guides. So anyone who you do get in contact with that's helping you, as he said, they're taking their personal time to do this. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and make sure they're fairly compensated, but also give them a little something extra at the end. If you were going to hire a guide, you would pay a lot more than anything Go just mentioned. Plus, you would also usually give a tip. And so, just you would have spent that money anyway if you had a guide. So I would just say, be generous. They're being generous with their time and sharing their fishing experience with you. And so be generous with them too.
but they'll have a
I'm
great
sorry to
time.
interrupt. I just
No, no, no,
yeah.
no. The eating, the food, everything is great, and it's super cheap. This is the best time I've seen in my last 47 years of my life. The best time to visit Japan if you have your income in U.S. dollars, euro, or any currency other than the yen.
Yep. Wow, that is really really good news, because I know a lot of people who are talking about going. So that's going to be really good for them to hear. So, well, let's see. I can be there by what? How's your Tuesday looking? I can be there by Tuesday noonish.
I'm actually free Tuesday.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
All
Oh, and
right, Go. Well, hey,
bring
look, I really appreciate you speaking. Oh, go ahead.
one more, one more. Bring
Oh,
cash.
yeah.
When you go into the
Oh,
mountains,
yes, yes. Thank
no
you.
no cashless payment, no QR code. When
Yeah.
in the
Nope.
mountains,
No debit
cash
cards.
only, please. Yes. So
I'm
yeah,
so
that's
glad
all.
you said that. No, I know. I'm really. That's really important, because I've been to a lot of countries where cash is king, and so and especially in the remote areas. So I'm really glad you pointed that out. Um, but speaking of being generous, again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Go. And I always appreciate our conversations. I'm sure this won't be the last one we record, hopefully, and I hope I do check this one off my bucket list and get to go fishing with you there.
That would be fun. It'd be great to have you here in Japan, Jason. And thank you
Oh, it'd be
for
great.
having me again today.
The pleasure is mine. I'll talk to you soon, Go.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for listening. I hope we've given you some practical takeaways that will help you plan your trip to Japan. For more episodes like this, visit tenkaratalk.com or follow Tenkara Talk on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I'm Jason Klass from Tenkara Talk, wishing you bon voyage on your Tenkara dream trip.